Hello, Country Meadow residents. We're continuing reading the book from Randy Pausch, The Last Lecture. And in here, he gives his dreams and different dreams that he had. He was an individual with terminal cancer, and he wrote this book. And giving us a little bit of a story here in the beginning. He's been invited to give a lecture at Carnegie Mellon, where he was a professor of computer science. And so, just probably a few months before he passed away, he gave the lecture. But he's talking about that now, and about the interaction between his wife Jay and himself. And so we're picking up on chapter 3 in part 1, and chapter 3 on page 15. It's called The Elephant in the Room. Jay was already in the hall, an unexpected full house of 400. And I hopped on stage to check out the podium and get organized. She could see how nervous I was. While I busied myself arranging my props, Jay noticed that I was making eye contact with almost no one. She thought that I couldn't bring myself to look into the crowd, knowing I might see a friend or a former student, and I'd be too overwhelmed by the emotions of that eye contact. There was a rustling in the audience as I got myself ready. For those who came to see just what a man dying of pancreatic cancer looked like. Surely there were questions. Was that my real hair? Yes, I kept all my hair during chemotherapy. Would they be able to sense how close to death I was as I spoke? My answer? Just watch. Even with the talk only minutes away, I continued puddling at the podium, deleting some slides, rearranging others. I was still working at it when I was given the signal. We're ready to go, someone told me. I wasn't in a suit. I wore no tie. I wasn't going to get up there in some professional tweeted jacket with leather elbow patches. Instead, I chose to give my lecture wearing the most appropriate childhood dream garb I could find in my closet. Granted, at first glance, I looked like the guy who'd take your order at a fast food drive-thru. But actually, the logo on my short-sleeve polo shirt was an emblem of honor, because it's the one worn by Walt Disney Imageries, the artists, writers, and engineers who created theme park fantasies. In 1995, I spent a 6-month sabbatical as an imagerer. It was a highlight of my life, the fulfillment of a childhood dream. That's why I was also wearing the oval Randy name badge given to me when I worked at Disney. I was paying tribute to that life experience and to Walt Disney himself, who famously had said, "If you can dream it, you can do it." I thanked the audience for coming, cracked a few jokes, and then I said, in case there's anyone who wandered in and doesn't know the backstory, my dad always taught me that when there's an elephant in the room, introduce it. If you look at my CAT scans, there are approximately 10 tumors in my liver. And the doctor told me I have 3 to 6 months of good health left. That was a month ago. So you can do the math. I flashed a giant image of the CAT scan of my liver onto the screen. The slide was headlined, "The Elephant in the Room." And I have hopefully inserted red arrows pointing to each of the individual tumors. I let the slide linger, so the audience could follow the arrows and count my tumors. All right, I said, that is what it is. We can't change it. We just have to decide how we'll respond. We can't change the cards we are dealt, just how we play the hand. In that moment, I was definitely feeling healthy and whole. The Randy of old, powered no doubt by adrenaline and the thrill of a full house. I knew I looked pretty healthy too, and that some people might have trouble reconciling that with the fact that I was near death. So I addressed it. If I don't seem as depressed or morbid as I should be, sorry to disappoint you. I said, and after people laughed, I added, I assure you, I am not in denial. It's not like I'm not aware of what's going on. My family, my 3 kids, my wife, we just decamped. We bought a lovely house in Virginia. We're doing that because that's a better place for the family to be down the road. I showed a slide of the new suburban home we just purchased. Above the photo of the house was the heading, I am not in denial. My point, Jay and I decided to uproot our family. I asked her to leave a home she has loved and friends who cared about her. We had taken the kids away from their Pittsburgh playmates. We had packed up our lives, throwing ourselves into a tornado of our own making, when we could have had just cocooned in Pittsburgh, waiting for me to die. We had made this move because we knew that once I was gone, Jay and the kids would need to live in a place where her extended family could help them and love them. She also wanted the audience to know that I looked good and felt okay, in part because my body had started to recover from the liberating chemotherapy and radiation my doctors had been giving me. I was now on easier to endure palliative chemo. I'm in phenomenally good health right now, I said. I mean, the greatest thing a cognitive dissonance you will ever see is that I'm in really good shape. In fact, I'm in better shape than most of you. I moved sideways toward the center stage. Hours earlier, I wasn't sure I have enough strength to do what I was about to do. But I now felt emboldened and potent. I dropped to the floor and began doing push-ups. In the audience, laughter and surprise, applause. It was almost as if I could hear everyone collectively exhaling their anxiety. It wasn't just some dying man. It was just me. I could begin. Part 2. Really achieving your childhood dreams. And then he gives a list of dreams that he had. Being in zero gravity. Playing in the NFL. Authoring an article in the World Book Encyclopedia. Being Captain Kirk. Winning stuffed animals. Being a Disney imager. A slide from my talk. Chapter 4. The Parent Lottery. I won the Parent Lottery. I was born with the winning ticket. A major reason I was able to live out my childhood dreams. My mother was a tough, old-school English teacher with nerves of titanium. She worked her students hard, enduring those parents who complained that she expected too much from kids. As her son, I knew a thing or two about her high expectations, and that became my good fortune. My dad was a World War II medic who served in the Battle of the Bulge. He founded a nonprofit group to help immigrant kids learn English. And for his livelihood, he ran a small business which sold automobile insurance to inner city Baltimore. His clients were mostly poor people with bad credit histories or few resources, and he'll find a way to get them insured and on the road. For a million reasons, my dad was my hero. I grew up comfortably in middle class in Columbia, Maryland. Money was never an issue in our house, mostly because my parents never saw a need to spend much. They were frugal to a fault. We rarely went out to dinner. We see a movie maybe once or twice a year. Watch TV? My parents would say, it's free. Or better yet, go to the library and get a book. When I was 2 years old and my sister was 4, my mom took us to the circus. I wanted to go again when I was 9. You don't need to go, my mom said. You already been to the circus. It sounds oppressive by today's standards, but it was actually a magical childhood. I really do see myself as a guy who had this incredible leg up in life because I have a mother and a father who got so many things right. We didn't buy much, but we thought about everything. That's because my dad had this infectious inquisitiveness about current events, history, our lives. In fact, growing up, I thought there were 2 types of families. One, those who needed a dictionary to get through dinner, and number 2, those who don't. We were number 1. Most every night, we end up consulting the dictionary, which we kept on a shelf just 6 steps from the table. If you have a question, my folks would say, then find the answer. The instinct in our house was never to sit around like slobs and wonder who knew we knew a better way. Open up the encyclopedia. Open up the dictionary. Open up your mind. My dad was also an incredible storyteller. He always said that stories should be told for a reason. He liked humorous anecdotes that turned into morality tales. He was a master at that kind of story, and I soaked up his techniques. That's why when my sister Tammy watched my last lecture online, she saw my mouth moving. She heard a voice, but it wasn't mine. It was Dad's. She knew I was recycling more than a few of his choicest bits of wisdom. I won't deny that for a second. In fact, at times I felt like I was channeling my dad on stage. I quote my father to people almost every day. Part of that is because if you dispense your own wisdom, others often dismiss it. If you offer wisdom from a third party, it seems less arrogant. Like my dad in your back pocket, you can't help yourself. You quote him every chance you get. My dad gave me advice on how to negotiate my way through life. He'd say things like, never make a decision until you have to. He also warned me that even if I was in a position of strength, whether at work or in a relationship, I had to play fair. Just because you're in the driver's seat, he'd say, doesn't mean you have to run people over. Lately, I find myself quoting my dad, even if it was something he didn't say. Whatever my point, it might as well have come from him. He seemed to know everything. My mother, meanwhile, knew plenty too. All my life, she saw it as part of her mission to keep my cockiness in check. I'm grateful for that now. Even these days, if someone asks her what it was like as a kid, she describes me what I was like as a kid. She described me as alert, but not terribly precocious. We now live in an age when parents praise every child as a genius. And here's my mother figuring alert ought to suffice as a compliment. When I was studying for my PhD, I took something called Theory Qualifier, which I can now definitely say was the second worst thing in my life after chemotherapy. When I complained to my mother about how hard and awful the test was, she'd lean over, pat me on the arm, and say, "We know how you feel, honey. And remember, when your father was your age, he was fighting the Germans." After I got my PhD, my mother took great relish in introducing me by saying, "This is my son. He's a doctor, but not the kind who helps people." My parents knew what it really took to help people. They were always finding big projects off the beaten path, then throwing themselves into them. Together, they underwrote a 50-student dormitory in rural Thailand, which was designed to help girls remain in school and avoid prostitution. My mother was always supremely charitable, and my father would have been happy giving everything away and living in a sackcloth instead of in the suburbans, where the rest of us wanted to live. In that sense, I considered my father the most Christian man I ever met. He was always a huge champion of social equality. Unlike my mom, he didn't easily embrace organized religion. We were Presbyterians. He was more focused on the grandest ideals and saw equality as the greatest of goals. He had high hopes for society and thought his hopes were often too often dashed. He remained a ragging optimist. At age 83, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia. Knowing that he didn't have long to live, he arranged to donate his body to medical science. And he gave money to continue his program in Thailand for at least 6 more years. Many people who saw my last lecture were taken with one particular photo that I flashed on the overhead screen. It's a photo of which I'm in my pajamas, leaning on my elbow, and it's so obvious that I was a kid who loved to dream big dreams. And let me show you the photo. The wood slat that cut across my body is in front of my bunk bed. My dad, a pretty able woodworker, made me that bed. The smile on that kid's face, the wood slat, the look in his eyes, that photo reminds me that I won the parent lottery. Although my children will have a loving mother who I know will guide them through life brilliantly, they will not have their father. I accepted that, but it does hurt. I like to believe my dad would have approved of how I'm going about these last months of life. He would have advised me to put everything in order for Jay to spend as much time as possible with the kids, the things I'm doing. I know he would see the sense in moving the family to Virginia. I think my dad would be reminding me that kids, more than anything else, need to know their parents love them. Their parents don't have to be alive for that to happen. Chapter 5. My imagination was always pretty hard to contain. Halfway through high school, I felt this urge to splash some of the thoughts swirling in my head onto the walls of my childhood bedroom. I asked my parents for permission. I want to paint things on my walls, I said. Like what? They asked. Things that matter to me, I said. Things I think would be cool, you'll see. That explanation was enough for my father. That's what was so great about him. He encouraged creativity just by smiling at you. He loved to watch the spark of enthusiasm turn into fireworks. And he understood me and my need to express myself in unconventional ways. So he thought my wall painting adventure was a great idea. My mother wasn't so high on the whole episode, but she relented pretty quickly when she saw how excited I was. She also knew Dad usually won out on these things. She might as well surrender peacefully. For 2 days, with the help of my sister Tammy and my friend Jack Sheriff, I painted on the walls of my bedroom. My father sat in the living room reading the newspaper, patiently waiting for the unveiling. My mother hovered in the hallway, completely nervous. She kept sneaking up on us, trying to get a peek. But we remained barricaded in the room. Like they say in the movies, this was a closed set. What did we paint? Well, I wanted to have a quadratic formula on the wall. In a quadratic equation, the highest power of the unknown quantity is a square. Always the nerd, I thought. That was worth celebrating. So right by the door, I painted the equation. Jack and I painted a large silver elevator door. To the left of the door, we drew up and down buttons. And above the elevator, we painted a panel with floor numbers 1 through 6. The number 3 was illuminated. We lived in a ranch house. It was just one level. So what I was doing was a big fantasizing to imagine 6 floors. But looking back, why didn't I paint 80 or 90 floors? If I was such a big shot dreamer, why did my elevator stop at 3? I don't know. Maybe it was a symbol of the balance in my life between aspiration and pragmatism. Given my limited artistic skills, I thought it best if I sketched things out in basic geometric shapes. So I painted a simple rocket ship with fins. I painted Snow White's mirror with the line, "Remember when I told you that you were the fairest?" I lied. On the ceiling, Jack and I wrote the words, "I'm trapped in the attic." We did the letters backward, so it seems as if we were imprisoned, and we've imprisoned someone up there, and it was scratching out an SOS. Because I love chess, Tammy painted chess pieces. She was the only one of us with any drawing talent. While she handled that, I painted a submarine lurking in a body of water beyond the bunk bed. I drew a periscope rising above the bed sheets in search of enemy ships. I always liked the story of Pandora's box, so Tammy and I painted our version of it. Pandora, from Greek mythology, was given a box with all the world's evils in it. She disobeyed orders not to open it. When the lid came off, evil spread throughout the world. I was always drawn to the story's optimistic ending. Left at the bottom of the box was hope. So inside my Pandora box, I wrote the word hope. Jack saw that and couldn't resist writing the word Bob over hope. When friends visited my room, it always took them a minute to figure out why the word Bob was there. Then came the inevitable eye roll. Given that it was the late 1970s, I wrote the word disco sucks over the door. My mother thought that was vulgar. One day when I wasn't looking, she quietly painted over the word sucks. That was the only editing she ever did. Friends who come by were always pretty impressed. I can't believe your parents let you do this, they say. Though my mom wasn't thrilled at the time, she never painted over the room, even decades after I moved out. In fact, over time, my bedroom became the focal point of a house tour when anyone came to visit. My mom began to realize people thought this was definitely cool, and they thought she was cool for allowing me to do it. Anyone out there who is a parent, if your kids want to paint their bedrooms as a favor to me, let them do it. It'll be okay. Don't worry about resale value on the house. I don't know how many more times I will get to visit my childhood house, but it is a gift every time I go there. I still sleep in that bunk bed my father built. I look at those crazy walls. I think about my parents allowing me to paint, and I fall asleep feeling lucky and pleased. Getting to Zero, Chapter 6. Getting to Zero G. It's important to have a specific dreams. When I was in grade school, a lot of kids wanted to become astronauts. I was aware from an early age that NASA wouldn't want me. I had heard that astronauts couldn't have glasses. I was okay with that. I didn't really want the whole astronaut gig. I just wanted the floating. Turns out NASA has a plane it uses to help astronauts acclimate to zero gravity. Everyone calls it the vomit comet, even though NASA refers to it as the weightless wonder, a public relations gesture aimed at distracting attention from the obvious. Whatever the plane is called, it's a sensational piece of machinery. It does parabolic arcs, and at the top of each arc, you get about 25 seconds when you experience the rough equivalent of weightlessness. As the plane dives, you feel like you're on a runaway roller coaster, but you're suspended, flying around. My dream became a possibility when I learned that NASA had a program in which college students could submit proposals for experiments on the plane. In 2001, our team at Carnegie Mellon students proposed a project using virtual reality. Being weightless is a sensation hard to fathom when you've been an earthling all your life. In zero gravity, The inner ear, which controls balance, isn't quite in sync with what your eyes are telling you. Nausea is often the result. Could virtual reality dry runs on the ground help? Was the question in our proposal. And it was a winner. We were invited to Johnson Space Center in Houston to ride the plane. I was probably more excited than any of my students. Floating. But late in the process, I got bad news. NASA made it very clear that under no circumstances could faculty advisors fly with their students. I was heartbroken, but I was not deterred. I would find a way around this brick wall. I decided to carefully read all the literature about the program, looking for loopholes, and I found one. NASA, always eager for good publicity, would allow journalists from a student's hometown to come for a ride. I called an official at NASA to ask for his fax number. "What are you going to fax us?" he asked. I explained my resignation as a faculty advisor and my application as the journalist. "I'll be accompanying my students in my new role as a member of the media," I said. And he said, "That's a little transparent, don't you think?" "Sure," I said, but I also promised him that I'll get information about our experiment into the news websites and send film of our virtual reality efforts to more mainstream journalists. I knew I could pull that off, and it was a win-win for everyone. He gave me his fax number. And as an aside, there's a lesson here. Have something to bring to the table, because that will make you more welcome. My experiment in Zero-G was spectacular. And no, I didn't throw up, thank you. I did get banged up a bit, though. Because at the end of the magical 25 seconds, when gravity returns to the plane, it's actually as if you become twice your weight. You can slam down pretty hard. That's why we were repeatedly told, feet down. You don't want to crash land on your neck. But I did manage to get on that plane almost 4 decades after floating because of one of my life's goals. It just proves that if you can find an opening, you can probably find a way to float through it. Chapter 7. I never made it to the NFL. I love football, tackle football. I started playing when I was 9 years old, and football got me through, helped me make it to who I am today. And even though I did not reach the National Football League, I sometimes think I got more from pursuing that dream and not accomplishing it than did for many of the ones I did accomplish. My romance with football started when my dad dragged me kicking and screaming to join a league. I had no desire to be there. I was naturally wimpy and the smallest kid by far. Fear turned to awe when I met my coach, Jim Graham, a hulky 6'4" wall of a guy. He'd been a linebacker at Penn State and was seriously old school. I mean, really old school. Like he thought the forward pass was a trick play. On the first day of practice, we were all scared to death. Plus, he hadn't brought along any footballs. One kid finally spoke up for us all. "Excuse me, Coach, there are no footballs." And Coach Graham responded, "We don't need any footballs." There was a silence while we thought about that. How many men on the football field at a time? he asked us. 11 on the team, we answered. So that makes me 22. So that makes 22. And how many people are touching the football at any given time? One of them. Right, he said. So we're going to work on what those other 21 guys are doing. Fundamentals. That was a great gift Coach Graham gave us. Fundamentals. 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 As a college professor, I've seen this one lesson so many kids ignore. Always tutor determinant. You got to get the fundamentals down because otherwise the fancy stuff isn't going to work. Coach Graham used to ride me hard. I remember one practice in particular. You're doing it all wrong, Randy. Go back, do it again. I tried to do what he wanted. It wasn't enough. You owe me. You'll be doing push-ups after practice. When I was finally dismissed, one of the assistant coaches came over to reassure me. Coach Graham rode you pretty hard, didn't he? He said. You could barely muster a yay. That's a good thing, the assistant told me. When you're screwing up and no one says anything to you anymore, that means they've given up on you. That lesson has stuck with me my whole life. When you see yourselves doing something badly and nobody's bothering to tell you anymore, that's a bad place to be. You may not want to hear it, but your critics are often the ones telling you they still love you and care about you and want to make you better. There's a lot of talk these days about giving children self-esteem. It's not something you give, something they have to build. Coach Graham worked in a non-cuddling zone. Self-esteem, he knew, was really only one way to teach kids how to develop it. You give them something they can't do. They work hard until they find they can do it, and you just keep repeating the process. When Coach Graham got a hold of me, I was this wimpy kid with no skills, no physical strength, and no conditioning. But he made me realize that if I worked hard enough, there would be things I can do tomorrow that I can't do today. Even now, having just turned 47, I can give you a 3-point stance that any NFL lineman would be proud of. I realize that these days, a guy like Coach Graham might get thrown out of the youth sports league. He'd be too tough. Parents would complain. I remember one game when our team was playing terrible. At halftime, in a rush for water, we almost knocked over the water bucket. Coach Graham was livid. Jez, that's the most I've seen you guys move since this game started. We were 11 years old, just standing there. Afraid he'd pick us up one by one and break us with his bare hands. Water, he barked. You boys want water? He lifted the bucket, dumped all the water on the ground. We watched him walk away and heard him mutter to an assistant coach. You can give water to these first-string defense. They played okay. Now let me be clear. Coach Graham would never endanger any kid. One reason he worked so hard on conditioning was he knew it reduces injuries. However, it was a chilly day. We all had access to water during the first half, and the dash to the water bucket was more about us being a bunch of brats than really needing hydration. Even so, if that kind of incident happens today, parents on the sideline would be pulling out their cell phones to call the league commissioner or maybe their lawyer. Saddens me that many kids today are so coddled. I think back to how I felt during that halftime rant. Yes, I was thirsty, but more than that, I felt humiliated. We had all let down Coach Graham, and he let us know in a way we never forget. He was right. We had shown no more energy. We had shown more energy at the water bucket than we had in the damn game. And getting chewed out by him meant something to us. During the second half, we went back on the field and gave it our all. I haven't seen Coach Graham since I was a teen, but he just keeps showing up in my head, forcing me to work harder whenever I feel like quitting, forcing me to be better. He gave me a feedback loop for the rest of my life. When we send our kids to play organized sports, football, soccer, swimming, whatever, for most of us, it's not because we're desperate for them to learn the intrinsics of the sport. What we really want them to learn is far more important: teamwork, perseverance, sportsmanship, the value of hard work, and the ability to deal with adversity. This kind of indirect learning is what some of us like to call a head fake. There are two kinds of head fakes. The first is literal. On a football field, a player will move his head one way so you think he's going in that direction. Then he goes in the opposite way. It's like a magician using misdirection. Coach Graham used to tell us to watch a player's waist. When his belly button goes, his body goes, he said. The second kind of head flake is the really important one, the one that teaches people things they don't realize they're learning until well into the process. If you're a head flake specialist, your hidden objective is to get them to learn something you want them to learn. This kind of head flake learning is absolutely vital. And Coach Graham was the master. Tomorrow, I hope you're enjoying this reading. I know there's probably other individuals that can read much better, but I enjoy this, and to spend some time with you and to read the last lecture. Tomorrow we'll start on chapter 8 on page 41, and the title is You'll Find Me Under V. Some of these chapters are rather short, some are longer, and we'll continue until we finish the book. So thank you for listening along, and